Welcome to another Colors of Prog. This is the first episode of this program I've done in over a month, apparently. Colors of Prog, Colors of Progressive Rock. Uh, colors meaning the sounds, the varieties, symphonic prog, prog metal, folk prog, just everything out there, and from all the countries. United States, Canada, the UK, Scotland, Wales, Italy, Japan, Finland, Norway, the goes on, Spain, Argentina, Cuba. Progressive rock is more popular now in a way than it was 5, 10 years ago, which is something I found very, very interesting. And there are more new bands coming out, more material. And there's also, for older beloved bands, they keep finding in the vaults material that we loved, and they're remastering it, remixing it, also alternate tracks, live material. There's a Yes box set, the infamous flight case. There's the Caravan box, the Van der Graaf generator box. It's just, there's no end to it. Although I'm waiting for the Camel box because I'm eagerly anticipating they'll do one of those, the band Camel. Anyway, so each one of these shows, I discuss a variety, a grab bag of prog rock recordings, old, new, from all over the world. So we're going to start with Italy, Libra. And this is called Musica E Parolee. Now, Libra, this Italian band was started in 1974. They were a bit of a schizophrenic affair to listen to. They seem to always have aspirations in their sound. By that I mean they're very good, but there's jazz and there's playful, goblin-esque, instrumental things going on, and there's funk. And there are some vocals on this album, Beyond the Fence particularly, one of the tunes, it's in English. So I kind of guess that Libra always wanted to make it big internationally. And they did. They had a bilingual guitarist and vocalist, Federico De Andrea, formerly of the Italian band Logan Dwight. They released one album in 1972 in Italy. And Logan Dwight was one of those bands that formerly played beat music, early rock, and they also played cover music from the bands of the time from the US and the UK. And their record wasn't very strong, but still much beloved in the prog rock community because there was some of a symphonic thing going on there. Logan Dwight also featured English language vocals, so that's interesting. Anyway, Musica E Parolee is an odd album because it features similarity to other bands of the period, other Italian bands. They used to tour incessantly, often, and with Banco and PFM, they were a live band, usually at the bottom of the bill, but they tried to get a following, which is pretty strong for a band with only one album to their name at the time. Oddly enough, Motown signed them. Yes, Motown in the United States. Depending on what you read or read, it was a 10-year deal or a 10-album deal. And they brought them over to the US and they re-recorded this album entirely now in English. And for Motown in the US market, And the album cover, of course, was different, but it was still called Libra. And Motown had them as a second act to Frank Zappa and Chicago, bands of that nature, and a little funky stuff going on. And in a year or two, Libra was pretty much thought of not as this Italian band who may have been like a little proggy, but suddenly this funk band from Italy. But you could tell there were a lot of those jazz leanings there, and there was still some of that prog sound and time signatures. So enter Walter Martino, who was in and out of the Italian band Goblin over the years. He joined Libra for their second album, A Winter's Day Nightmare, in 1976, and of course I have it. This is a pretty killer cover, actually. And it's on the Motown label. It's beautiful, mint condition. The seller either didn't know or didn't care what he had. And there's only 8 tracks on this, because some of them are pretty long, but they're not like disco. It's not like Italian pop. It's sort of like prog jazz funk, but it's not really entirely successful. Anyway, so Walter Martino, who was in Goblin, still in Goblin, out of Goblin, in Goblin, joined the band, and Winter's Day Nightmare, despite the really crazy cover, bombed miserably in the United States. Motown cut the contract, and Libra returned back to Italy, and singer-guitarist DeAndrea quit the band. Enter moonlighting Goblin keyboardist, another Goblin member, Maurizio Guarini, joined Martino for Libra's Schock. Notice the spelling as Schock. Now, Schock is the soundtrack album, all instrumental, to the Mario Bava film, also called Schock, also known as Transfer Suspense Hypnose. And this is from, I believe 1977, yes. And this soundtrack was originally on the Cinebox label. It's not must-have prog, and even though members of Goblin appear on it, it still has quite an odd sound. The bass player Dina Kappa's occasional dive into funk patterns makes it kind of interesting, but I think they were trying to do a Goblin thing with the Schock soundtrack, possibly extend Libra's life as a recording act. What I found interesting is that Cinebox re-released this on compact disc in 2015 with over an hour of additional tracks. They remastered the original soundtrack, and then they added over an hour's worth of extra stuff. So, that being said, it's worth it for Italian soundtrack lovers, Goblin completists, and those Italian prog lovers who just can't get enough of anything. It's a little funky as far as the first album goes, Libra. And if you're a completist, you probably have both of the US releases, although nice to have this in your collection, right? Take that Swan. So, speaking of another Italian band who had a English language recording, is Il Rovescio della Medaglia. The band's name translates to the other side of the coin, and They weren't really prolific, although they broke up and got back together many times over the years. They were frequently, and even today, referred to as RDM for short, because it's a mouthful, isn't it? Anyway, this release here is very well regarded in the prog rock community. The band was formed in 1970. They released an album called La Bibbia, the Bible, and it wasn't a rewritten version of the Bible. They were very the music was the lyrics were informed by the Bible, and it was prog rock with some heavy rock. So, but it didn't do tremendous. Prog rock, heavy rock, a little bit of classical, and there were no keyboards in the band. There was no keyboards in the band at that time. So 2 years later, they added Franco Di Sabatino as a keyboardist, and suddenly Contamination results, this album. And it's immediately, it was a huge favorite of mine, and it is of others, because they joined up with Luis Bacalov, who is a composer. He did a lot of soundtracks for Spanish and Italian thrillers, westerns, love stories. Very prolific composer. But he also worked a lot with Italian bands, especially those in the prog rock community, adding a different sound to some of their work. He most famously worked with New Trolls a number of times, doing their Concerto Grosso albums, and he worked with a few other bands. So he worked with RDM on Contamination, and it's a very interesting attempt at molding rock, classical music, and progressive rock. And I always loved this album. I liked it quite a bit. Now, they too got an English language deal, very popular at the time, early 1970s, with RCA. So here's the English version, English language version, RDM Contamination. I will read to you because this is actually a German pressing. Beautiful, beautiful copy. Again, I lucked out because the seller of this didn't know what he had or cared or even just wanted to get rid of it. The back cover, very nice, mint condition. The album, the vinyl is beautiful. So, in efforts to spread the word of RDM, I tried to explain what the hell the record was about. I quote, "Why is this record entitled Contamination? Because the whole effect is a contamination of 4 different elements. The first of these elements is between the pure classicism of Bach's music and the very original pop sound of the group. The second of these elements is between the classical nature of Bacalov's large orchestra and the electronic instruments of RDM. By using a Bach theme as a basis, with sometimes romantic, sometimes modern classical passages, a completely unique and original composition is obtained, blah, blah, blah." What's interesting is that some of the beautifully written and composed lyrics in Italian got translated into sometimes awkward English language. The singing is fine in English. It's the same band, Pino Ballerini, vocalist, but something ora non ricordo became orphan me. Yes. And they side to lay. Another name, am I? Yes. Well, wasn't completely successful. Oddly enough, this is on the RCA's Cosmos Peters International label. They picked up a few Italian bands that were getting very popular from 71 to 75, maybe 76. and they had the band members come over to the States and re-record everything in English. Sometimes PFM's Chocolate Kings is one. There's a few other albums out there, other bands, and sometimes the English language lyrics sung were just done over the original Italian music tracks, the original, instrumental tracks. So there wasn't, it just brought the singers over, or, and the running time is almost exactly. What's interesting about this album, I found, was that everything was re-recorded, even the instruments, under the wise eye of Bacalov. Unfortunately, it failed to turn the world around. I personally like both versions, but I also believe that the American one is just as good as the Italian one, if you could find it. All vocals in English language, of course. This is RDM. Next we have is Emerald Dawn Visions. Compact disc. Sorry for the glare. Formed in 2010 in Edinburgh, Scotland, but moving to Cornwall, England a short time later, Emerald Dawn is a symphonic prog group, creating slow to medium tempo atmospheric tunes, touch of goth. Visions is their second album. I much like the others, and I think they've done about 4 or 5 in total, with the most recent one released 2021. It's a dreamy, pleasant listen. Katrina Stewart, also known as Trey, sings, plays keyboards, flutes, guitars. Alan Carter plays guitars, tenor and soprano saxophones, and they are also joined by J.J. Quick on bass and Tom Jackson on drums for this. They reminded me a little bit of October Project and post-October Project Mary Fall. They reminded me of a number of keyboard-heavy symphonic progressive rock music bands which had a deep-throated female singer. I wouldn't say Annie Hassel or Renaissance, but I think you might be getting the idea. She has a deep voice, and Alan Carter, who sings as well, has a deep voice. It's very, very interesting. I think post-Floydian dip into somewhere surrounded by low-voice singers swirling keyboards. I have their other albums and CDs in my collection, and I hope to get to them at some point in time. And I might be discussing them later. Finally, I have Yes is Going for the One. Yeah, 1977. After various keyboard players had occupied his chair for years, the Schock returned of Rick Wakeman, and it is one of the best lineups. Well, the best lineups of Yes were always Anderson, Howe, Squire, Wakeman, and Allen White. All your classic Yes material. Some people, I like the Bruford material, but when Wakeman was there, it just took it to another level. And you know what? It's funny. Even now, oddly enough, this album, Going for the One, is not an immediate fan favorite in the prog community. And the love for it is equal to the dislike for it. I always liked it, even when it first came out back in 1977. So, that being said, interesting enough, in 2003, Elektra, then distributed by Rhino Records, remastered the tapes they had in their possession by Bill Inglot, and nice remastering. But he also dug deep into the vaults, so he found 3 songs and remastered those that were recorded during the sessions in Montreux, Switzerland, when they were recording Going for the One. Montreux's theme, Vevette, Amazing Grace, yes, Amazing Grace. and he found rehearsals and outtakes for Going for the One, Parallel, Turn of the Century, and an early version of Awaken called Easter Number, because even then they weren't sure what they were calling Awaken. So the original Going for the One is Going for the One, Turn of the Century, Parallels, Wondrous Stories, and Awaken, only 5 tracks, and it's a favorite of mine, always has been. And it's funny, Awaken is occasionally played by Yes, even today, on their various tours. ARW, Anderson, Raven, and Wakeman, when they had their tours because of the pandemic, about 3 years ago, they toured for 2 to 3 years, supported by very good performers on bass and drums. And they played Awaken on occasion, I believe. Definitely fans of symphonic rock sound. This is one of the great, to me, Yes recordings. And it's funny because it's 1977. The very next year, they came out with Tormato, which was uneven, not as strong as Going for the One. Had Don't Kill the Whales, I believe, and which is a much better song live than it is the studio version. If you ever have seen the band play Don't Kill the Whales live, or any incarnations of the band play that, it sounds much more upbeat and kind of makes it happen. But by 1980, both Anderson and Wakeman had left for a while. But they come back, they would leave again, But anyway, so I just wanted to discuss the out of print, went quickly out of print, the Elektra Rhino remaster of Going for the One. If you could see that. Anyway, that's our show. Colors of Prog. I'm glad to be back. I hope everything is cool and safe, and winter is coming. So listen to great music, and as more shows open up, more venues open up, more bands are touring. Some are delayed again until the spring coming. Enjoy life.